Okay, so the title for today's message is Always and Forever. So, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Today is the day of love. But I don't think it's just a day of like romantic love because that's sometimes overrated. But I think that like today is the day of showing love to those you love, right? Like your parents or your friends or, your siblings. Hopefully that you love them, all these things. We're showing them love. And this idea of love got me thinking about especially a parent's love. Because I think a parent's love is the most unconditional love. Like, all of us, some of you are still teenagers, all of us who went the teenage stage, like, I'm sure no matter how good you were, we've all done stuff to make our parents angry. We've all done stuff to test the limits of their love, right? Like, we've all done stuff like that. But I think a parent's love is like that. It's like forever. And how many of you, most of you we're all grown up, your parents will still say stuff like this. They'll look at you and they'll be like, no matter how old you get, you're always gonna be my baby. Do your parents say stuff like that? Or like, it's embarrassing, right? You're just like, oh my God. And it's like at the most embarrassing time, they'll say stuff like that, like in front of your friends or whatever. But that, like, I used to like roll my eyes and be super grossed out by that. But now that I'm a parent, I get it. And a few years ago, I think I was like on social media or something, and I saw this ad, like this commercial. I kid you not, I started crying, okay? And I found it, and I wanted to show you guys because this is kind of like a perfect picture of what I think a parent's love is like, okay? So let's see if the video will work. Can we get it to turn on? Can we get it on in the back, too?
Ah, j'aime bien celle-ci. J'aime bien la matière. Qu'est-ce que t'en penses?
C'est bien, ça.
C'est pratique ça, non? Fait 92.
Votre nom, s'il vous plaît?
Jules Gauthier. Et vous?
Marie, pourquoi?
C'est joli, Marie.
Merci.
C'est bon, maman.
D'accord.
Quoi? Maman, tu sais, j'habiterai pas très loin de chez toi. Hein.
Je sais.
Okay, obviously it's an IKEA commercial, right? IKEA, your work messing with my heart. Like when I see that kind of thing, I just cry because I think of my little son, And I think, oh my gosh, that's so true. When he's gonna go to college and hit on some girl at IKEA, I'm gonna see him as a 4-year-old boy, Like what? But like it's so true, right? Like a parent's love. Like none of your parents in this room, but I'm gonna tell you one day you will understand what it's like to either you've experienced a parent's love or have a parent's love yourself. But man, those marketing people, they know what they're doing. So that reminded me of another book. How many of you read this book before? I think it's Love You Forever. Yeah, Love You Forever. Have you guys read this book before? Yeah? Okay, guys. I read this book to Chisung and I cry like every single time. And so if you haven't read the book, it's the idea of like there's a mom and a baby and like, she's rocking the baby and the main like phrase that's in this book is, how does it go? It goes, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. And then you see the baby grow up into like a toddler messing with like the toilet and putting her mom's jewelry on the toilet, stuff like that. But when the baby's sleeping, she'll go in and she'll say the same thing. I love you forever, I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. And then you see the baby as like a teenager and then as like an adult. And eventually you see that the mom is a grandma. She's old. And then she's like, you better come. I'm like getting really old. I'm like dying. And so then you see this grown man now, and he's holding his mom, and he's singing the same thing. And then he goes home to his daughter and sings the same thing. And I just cry every single time I read that book because I think that shows the power of like a parent's love. Even though we miscommunicate with them, even though we have like broken pasts with them sometimes. Like, a parent's love is usually forever. And that concept reminded me of what we're exploring today. Because for those of you who've been here or not here for a while, we are going through the attributes of God, of like, how can we really know who God is? And there are certain attributes of God that only God has, and we're going over those right now. And one of those for today is God's infinitude. I know it's a fancy word, but it basically means infinity, okay? And so, like, this idea of a parent's love being always and forever is really what stuck out to me when I thought about God's love is always and forever. So the definition of infinite, I looked it up on Google, and I was actually I don't know if can you guys read that? Very fascinated, because I typed it up on Google, and then it says limitless, which is true. And then the example they used is the infinite mercy of God, which I thought that was very interesting, that like a secular like Google could like use that as like a sentence example, because that's true. I feel like there's no other person you can describe as being infinitely something, infinitely loving, infinitely kind than God himself. That's the very best example. And the idea of infinite being limitless, there's no boundaries, there's no bounds. Like, it just goes on forever and ever and ever, like an infinity sign, right? Like, it loops around all the time. So what does it mean when we talk about the fact that God is infinite? Okay, there's three things. First of all, what does it mean that God is infinite? It means this: whatever God is and all that God is, he is without limits. Okay, so everything that it talks about God being who he is without limits. He doesn't love us to a certain point and you're like, ooh, you crossed that line. I don't love you anymore. Like, that's not how God's love works. It's not like his mercy has a tank. You know, like, every parent has probably said this to you. Your parents have been like, how many parents are like, I am this close to losing it? You know, which parents have been like, I am this close to losing it right now? You know, like being angry or whatever. That's not how God is. He never has a limit. He never runs out of patience and mercy and kindness like our human parents do, because they're human. So whatever God is, all that God is, he is without limits. When we see that God is kind, he is kind without limits. When we see that God is good, he is good without limits, without conditions. When we say that God is love, he is love without limits, without condition. But here's the second thing. Whatever God is, he is without limits. But number two, it is impossible for us as created, limited minds to grasp a limitless God. Like, if you could think about like forever, like you can try to think about forever, but like your brain's gonna run out of like being able to really understand what infinity looks like and feels like. Because we are limited. Like, Tom Brady, as awesome as he is, one day he'll be old. I don't know when, but one day he'll be old, and like he won't be able to win one day, maybe in like 40 years, but like I don't know. Like, everyone has limits. Everyone has limits. Like, as strong as we are right now, as smart as we are right now, one day all of us have limits. We will reach our limit point. But God has no limits at all. And that's hard for us to understand. We can't. And so the third thing is this: even though we can't understand it, we are made to know God truly so we can experience his limitlessness in our lives. But how exactly can we experience that? How can we experience a limitless God? So here's the thing. I'm going to throw in some like really interesting stuff that you probably normally don't hear at a church service, okay? But this is really important stuff that I think that relates to today. So I believe that our early experiences in our lives, so your early experience in your family, your childhood experience with relationships, your early first experiences with church as a kid, because a lot of you in this room have grown up in church, right? So your first, like, maybe like when you're elementary school years, your experience of church at that time sets the blueprint the foundation upon which you build everything else as an adult. Okay? So like how you experience your parents, if you don't get a lot of love from them, like a lot of kids who are neglected, like that sets the stage for how they view relationships in their future as adults. And so the same thing goes with church and like spiritual relationships. It's like, remember I talked about at the beginning of the series, like as human beings, we can never like understand something new without connecting it to something old. So like when kids learn about dogs, like dogs have 4 legs, right? Like they'll go to the zoo and they'll call every 4-legged animal a dog because like that's like in their brain. They're trying to build upon this new knowledge, upon old knowledge. Like in the same way, our first experience, what's stuck in our brain about church or family or love or relationships, that first view of that really is a blueprint and a foundation for you to build the rest of your life. And so, in a lot of ways, what's your first relationship? The minute you come out of your mom, however you came out, like, who's the first relationship you have? Who's the first relationship? Mom and dad, but mom especially, right? Mom and dad, both of them. Like, that's your first, like, when you come out into this world and you're crying and you look really gross, like, that's your first experience is with your mom and your dad. And so this is called attachment theory, okay? Real fancy psychological attachment theory about, like, your attachments when you're young, how that impacts you as an adult. Now, so I want to share the 4 attachment styles. I'm going to preface this by saying, whatever style of attachment you and I first experience, it's not forever. Like, we can always overcome them, or we can always learn or grow. Or someone might have a really good attachment, but then something really traumatic happens, and that could shake that. Or it could be a really bad early experience, but we can overcome that through things. So no one is stuck in that place, but it's helpful for us to know where we start, okay? So here are the 4 attachment types, okay? The first one, and I found some really cute graphics online. So the first one's called secure. Okay, so secure babies, they like literally tested this out with a bunch of babies. They put babies in a room with their moms and a stranger, and they tested this out, okay? So babies that show secure attachment, obviously, it means that they're secure and confident, okay? So when parents leave, they cry because they're sad. When parents come back, they're like, go to their mom for comfort, and they're happy again, and they start playing again. So they see, like, babies who are secure, they feel confident. They trust that their parent can comfort them. When they're in distress, like, it's only for a short amount of time, and their parents will come back, and they will comfort them. Now, what that looks like as older people, when we grow up, is that when we have secure attachments all throughout our life, which very few people have all throughout their life, but if you have that, that means you grow up to be secure and confident. So you know who you are, and you also learn how it's easy for you to trust, but not like so bad trust, like really trust other people and really have good relationships because you're secure about yourself. So you're not trying to find all of your needs in somebody else. Does that make sense? Like, that's what that translates to. Okay, number 2 attachment style. Anxious, okay? Look at that little green, cute little heart thing. Okay, anxious. So babies that show anxious attachment, it's really interesting. What happens is, when babies leave, they cry. Or when mom leaves, baby cries, like the secure baby, okay? But when mom comes back, they are inconsolable. They're still, like, crying. They have a very long period of time before they can, like, calm down. And they're very anxious. They're very afraid that, like they're going to leave again. So there's, like, a level of insecurity in them. For whatever reason, they're still upset. And they have a really hard time getting close because they feel afraid that someone's just going to leave. So what that looks like when people grow up as anxious babies is that they really want to be close to other people, but there's a lot of anxiety that that person doesn't love as much as that person loves. Does that make sense? It's like, I have a relationship, and, like, I just, like, love this person, but then, like, it's really hard for me to, like, I feel like I love more than that person loves. You know, that kind of approach. And so anxious attachment babies, that's how it happens when they grow up. Now, avoidant attachment is a third kind. So I think Purple Heart, yeah. Avoidant attachment. What's interesting is that these babies, when the parent leaves, they're sad. right? But when the mom, or sorry, rephrase. When the mom leaves, the baby doesn't care. Like they don't show any distress. And when mom comes back, they still don't care. And they actually avoid the parent more because it's like, well, they can't really trust, or like, I don't get my feelings, like, like, I don't care about you, kind of a like approach. And so how that translates as people get older is that, people are usually very independent. Independence is not a bad thing, but like so independent, they have relationships, but once it gets like kind of close, they're like, like, nope, on my own. Like, I don't have to trust that person. If I don't trust or love that person, then no one can hurt me. That's kind of like how they approach things. So those are the first three that they found, but over time they found a fourth category. And the fourth category is this one, fearful, avoidant, or they call it disorganized. So like babies who show kind of both of the last two, anxious, but then like, oh, they want to avoid. Like, oh, they kind of like want to, but then they kind of don't. Like, it's like you can't really tell what they're doing. And so a lot of these babies, like when they grow up and if they stay this way, it's like confusing. Because they want to get close to people, but then they don't. And it's like this constant like tug of war. And a lot of people like get very confused. Like, are you my friend? Are you not my friend? Like, what, And so that's kind of how it can translate. Remember, again, I guys told you guys, you are not in that attachment pattern forever. So you can have secure attachments, traumatic things can happen, and that can make you insecure. Or you can have insecure start, a really awful start to life, but you can grow and overcome that. So all of us can move within that. But the important thing to know is that we all do have some kind of attachment pattern, all of us. Nobody ever is born on this earth as a test tube baby. Like, everyone came out of somebody, okay? And like, all of us have early caregivers, early parents. Like, all of us have that. Now, here's the thing. There's been a lot of people talking about this, about how our early attachment patterns, we unconsciously put that to God, right? So we're like, if I am an anxious kind of person, not like anxiety, but like anxious attachment, where like, I don't believe that like God can love me as much as I love him. Or avoidant, like, I don't need God. Like, he's disappointed me. So like, I don't need him. Like we unconsciously take those patterns and put that onto him. A lot of people do that. That's why it's important to know what our attachment patterns are. How do we tend to do relationships around us? Because we unconsciously put that filter onto God too. Because like God, you can't see, right? But like friends, parents, those things you can see. So it's actually easier to relate this way, harder to relate this way. So when you heard any of those, what do you think you are? Like, you don't have to share it out loud, but like, what kind of patterns do you think you had as a kid? What kind of patterns do you think you have now as an adult? That can change. But oftentimes, look at your friendships. Look at the friendships that were hard in the last 10 years of your life. Relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends, like friends, parents, what's been hard? And how do you tend to do that? Because that might be how you do that with God. Have you guys ever heard the saying among Christian circles, Christianity isn't a religion, it's a relationship, right? Like everyone talks about that as Christianity. Well, it's true. Knowing God is a relationship. And relationships come with certain attachment patterns. Remember how attachment theory is talking about when babies have anxiety when they separate, and then it comes back, how they handle it? In the same way, as Christians, we all face examples in our lives, situations where we feel like God is far away, right? All of us as Christians, you've gone through that at some point in your life where you feel like God is far away. He's far away. He's gone away, like that parent that leaves the room. And then when he comes back, how do we respond or react to him? That's really shows us how we relate to God. But there is hope. There is. If you're like, oh, shoot, Stacey, well, I just have the worst attachment pattern possible. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Not come to church? Like, no, there's hope for every single person. There's healing for every single person. Like, all of us can overcome those things through God and through awareness and through all of the natural things like forgiveness and healing and all the things that we're called to do. He made a way for us to know him, both in our heads and our hearts. Like, both of those are important. I'm going to go over the head knowledge first, because when you know the truth sets you free, okay? So the first thing is this. Can we go to the verse, John 3:16? This is like the most famous verse in all, like, some of you are like, oh man, I know this verse like so well. Yeah, it's the most famous verse for a reason. It says this: for God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. I highlighted here, for God so loved the world, because that's the place I want to focus on today. He so loved us, so limitlessly, unconditionally, forever and ever loved us that he did this. He so loved us. When you think about Christianity, it's all about attachment patterns. Look at Adam and Eve. When they were first made in the garden, there was secure attachment there. They were so like confident in God and had so much peace. I mean, they were naked, had no shame, like everything was good. And then what happened? Sin came and separated God from them, just like attachment, separated from those that we love. And all of Christianity is telling the story of how God is trying to bring us back, trying to bridge that gap, trying to show us that like he's not gone, that he's there with us. But all of us have our own response when we feel like God is far away. Maybe some of us are anxious. Like, we just feel like, well, God can never love me as much as I love him. Like, I can't feel his love. I don't know if his love is there. Or maybe we're avoidant, like, well, I don't need God. Like, whatever. Like, I can do it on my own. Or some combination of both. Jesus made a way for us to come back to him, to gain secure attachment with him again by believing in his so loved the world, his limitless, always and forever love for us. That IKEA mom, man, God's got nothing on her. Like, he loves beyond and beyond and beyond what our parents can ever love us, always and forever. Can we go to 1 John 4:16 and 18? In that verse, 1 John 4:16 and 18, it says this: and so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. God does not just feel love. He is love. There's a huge difference. Most of us can feel love, but most of us, are we love all the time to everyone around us? No. God is love. The fullness of his love is always and forever. And his love never stops because we do something wrong or we mess up. Yes, there are consequences for what we do. Because God loves us, there are consequences for what we do. However, his love does not stop. Maybe someone in your childhood someone somewhere told you you're never good enough. Someone somewhere told you in your life that you're not smart enough, that you're stupid, that no one cares about you, like you're just a piece of whatever they said. Like maybe a friend or someone, a teacher, or maybe even a pastor, or someone told you you're not good enough, you're not worthy of love. All of us in this room, I'm sure, have heard something like that from somebody in our lives. Every one of us. And if you believe that, you are believing the devil's lies, my friends, okay? Because those are lies. Do you hear me? Those lies that you are not worthy enough, those lies that you are not worthy of love, that you're not good enough, those are the lies of the enemy. Do not give space for those lies to rule your life. because that is not how God made you to be. That is not what God thinks when he sees you. Guys, all of us have heard those things. Those thoughts probably run through our brain more often than we think. Do not give the enemy that space. Don't give him that space. Because God always and forever loves you. He made you. He has a purpose for you. Somebody once asked me when I was a Sunday school teacher way back in the day, you know that kid that's like real smart, that like tries to like stump you with a really good question, and you're just like, oh, that kid, you know? Okay, so I had one of those kids. And he asked me, he was like, I have a question. I'm like, okay, what's your question? And he's like, if there are, 7 billion people on this earth, then how is God supposed to hear my prayer? Because how can he hear so many people's prayers? That's a good question, kid. That's true. Because God is infinity and limitless forever and ever and ever. He hears you. He knows you. He sees you. And he always and forever will declare that he loves you. That's who God is. Don't think, oh, my prayer's not as important. My issues are not as important as that person. Every single person, he wants to hear you and know you. He already does. He's just waiting for you to talk to him. The last verse for today, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 and verse 7 and 8. It says this, love is patient, love is kind. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Remember that God is love, right? So you can replace this with God is patient, God is kind. God always protects. God always trusts. God always hopes. God always perseveres, and God never fails. Can you guys repeat that after me? Is that still up there? Yeah. Okay. God is patient. God is kind. God always protects. God always trusts. God always hopes. God always perseveres. God never fails. If you just say this to yourself every day and truly believe in this truth and live this truth, you will be the most free person on planet Earth. Guys, all of our lives, we've all heard the opposite of this. We're not worthy. We're not good enough. And sometimes people hear it from church, and that's the most heartbreaking place to hear that. If you've ever heard any of those kinds of things, that you're not worthy, that you're just a sinner, that you just screw things up, that you're just a bad example for everyone at church, that you shouldn't be in this youth group because you just screw everything up, if any of you have ever heard those things, I want to stand here on behalf of all church leaders and tell you, I'm sorry. That's not okay. That was not okay to say those things. It was not okay for you guys to hear those things. And I want to remind you, church is full of broken, super screwed up people trying to come together to know God. I'm not excusing what those people said. But sometimes broken people will say broken things and cause more people to be broken. We all have work to do. We all have work to do to grow in secure attachment with God. That is going to be a lifelong process. It's not like you go to church for like 5 years and it's done. Like, this is probably a lifelong process where you're learning how to come together, like bring the pieces of you that are broken, and that process of coming together will take time for all of us. Now, that's head knowledge, okay? But heart knowledge is just as important. Because you might know all of those things, but if you don't feel those things in your life, then sometimes those truths don't seem very strong, right, in your personal experience. You have to have both. You have to have head knowledge and heart knowledge. So how can we have heart knowledge? How can we truly experience, like, God's love? Like, I don't know. I know it, but, like, I just don't feel it, Stacey. I've heard that a lot, and I get you. There are times when like you just don't feel it. But I do believe that God can speak to you. God knows how you're wired. He knows what to say to get your attention. And he will do it if you want him to. So how can we experience that heart knowledge? How can we know this truth of God for ourselves? 3 things. First, look at your heart. Look at the relationships in your life. What is your natural go-to tendency with how you relate to others? What is your attachment pattern? Do you tend to trust people, or do you tend to avoid people because they're not trustworthy? Do you overtrust them, expect them to fulfill all of your needs? That's not healthy either. Like, all of us have one of those patterns, and we probably move between all of them, all of us, right? The more you realize your own attachment patterns and your own ways of relating to people, the more you can get a better idea of how maybe you relate to God that way. But God is here to say, hey, that's okay. I want to heal that, and I want to bridge that gap because I am always and forever in love with you. And so let's work through this. But the more you know, the more it will help you to know how to relate to God. Does that make sense? Second thing is ask God to heal your own heart from those broken, insecure attachment patterns. Ask God to heal your past, to heal the things that hold you captive. Like the things your mom said to you that were wrong when you were 5 and you're 25, but you still hold on to them. Or those things like when you were 12, like a youth pastor said that you still hold on to. All of us have that. I still have that. I'm working through those things. All of us, but all of us can choose healing. All of us can say, you know what? No, that will not rule my life anymore. God, would you heal my past? Would you help me let it go? Would you help me forgive? I think sometimes we hold on to anger because that's comfortable. Because we've had it for so long that it's like comfortable for us. But it will break your life. It will, all of us. And I have a kid now, right? So like if I don't heal these things, I will only repeat those things to him. I will only repeat those things with my husband if I don't like work through the process. It will take a long time sometimes, but I have to start trying because I don't want to repeat that in my own life. And I don't want that to come between me and God. And the last thing is this. When you have a friend and something weird is like, there's like tension between you guys. Something's weird, what do? How do you heal that? If you just ignore each other, you're not going to be friends anymore, eventually. The only way to heal a relationship is to start talking to each other. You have to start talking to each other. Being like, look, it's weird between me and you and JD right now. Like, we need to talk, okay? Because, like, I don't want it to be weird anymore. Like, you have to start talking. Like, Jack, me and you, it's weird. We got to talk about this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have to talk to people. In the same way, you have to talk to God. Because he's going to talk back. He's waiting for you. Be like, God, dude, this sucks. I have super effed up, like, attachment patterns. Like, please help me. Like, I want to get over this. Like, talk to him. Build that bridge. Nobody can talk to God for you. There's no ventriloquist where, like, someone can talk through your mouth to God. Only you can talk to God yourself. Can I have the praise team come up? A few weeks ago, my son, he's 4, and I began to realize that he has figured out that in his mind, he thinks love is conditional. Like if he does good enough, if he doesn't mess up, then we love him more. And it broke my heart to realize he's already like thinking that way. And so I sat him down and I was like, Chisung, I was like, mommy loves you, right? He goes, I know. I said, do you think mommy loves you when you mess up? And I said, mommy always loves you. If you mess up, mommy loves you. When you do bad things, mommy still loves you. Like when you don't listen to mommy, Mommy doesn't like it, but Mommy still loves you. And I said, when does Mommy love you? And I said, Mommy loves you always. And last night, I don't know, I swear, this kid knows like my message or something, I don't even know. But last night I was putting him to bed. That's like me and his, like him and my thing. I put him to bed. And I said, okay, Jisung, night night. And I was leaving the room and he goes, Mommy, I love you always. And when I heard that, my heart was just like, oh my God, like just, okay, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Like that's what I was like. But I thought about it and I thought about when we tell God, God, I know you always love me. I know it's been hard and sometimes I'm really mad at you, but I know you love me always. And I love you always too. Like, what do you think God's heart's gonna do when you say stuff like that? Guys, He's here. He wants to heal you. He wants to show you His always and forever limitless love. That's what He wants to do. Will you just talk to Him today? Can we all stand? We're going to sing this song. This is one of my favorite songs, and Nicole and the team picked this song without even knowing, but this is the perfect song for today. Of like the chorus, it goes like this. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? Like wherever your relationship has been like, whether it's been a long time since you've talked to Him or not, ask Him, will you meet me here again? Will you speak to me again? Because we got to talk for this relationship to get to a good place. And so I'm here again. Can we sing this song together? Whatever you've realized today, whatever God has spoken to you, believe that it's God speaking to you and say, God, I want to build that again. I want to talk to you again. I want to know your love. Would you please come and would you speak to me? So let's pray that together right now. Yes, Jesus, we ask that you that were wrong. God, we ask right now that you would break those things. God, you would break that stronghold over our lives. We say no to those things right now. And we say, God, would you move in our hearts? Would you do those things to give healing to us? Would you heal us of those words? Would you heal us of those actions? Would you heal us of all the times that we've all heard these things that were wrong? God, would you cause our hearts to be open to you, that we can desire secure attachment with you again, that we want to love you, we want to know you, we want to be with you, God. We want more of you, God. Would you come? Would you heal our hearts? Help us to forgive. Help us to let go. Help us to seek more of you, to know more of you, desire more of you in our lives, God, to restore that relationship with you again. God, I ask for that desire in our hearts, Jesus, right now.
Not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Enough for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? All I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
God, we know that you hear our prayers, even the ones that we can't even vocalize yet, the ones that are deep in our soul that we can't even say. God, you know what they are. God, you know every single person's past and history and the hurt that we each carry. You know it better than we know it sometimes. And God, today we ask that this truth of knowing that you are infinite, that your love is always and forever, would that be what heals us of all the words and all the experiences in our past that were the opposite of that? Would you help us to take that step towards you again and say, God, I don't want to have these bad attachment patterns. I don't want to live by these lies of the enemy. I don't want to repeat that in my relationship in my life right now. I want to be free, and I want to be whole, and I want to have hope. God, would you hear each person's prayer for that today? And would you do that work today? Because this is your word and your message for each of us today. So God, I just bless every person in this room right now, every person watching on the live stream, every person who's watching the recording one day, even if it's years from now that someone watches the recording, that God, you would move in their hearts to heal them, to bring them to you, to show them that your love for them is always and forever. God, we thank you. We love you. We pray all these things in your son's precious name. Amen.